On a quiet street in Newport, Rhode Island, a small 18th century synagogue has become a powerful symbol of American religious and civil freedom. For it was to the congregants of Touro Synagogue in 1790 that President George Washington made a promise that has echoed down the years. To bigotry, no sanction. To persecution, no assistance. A guarantee that a few years later became the cornerstone of the Bill of Rights. Its form is restrained and modest, a simple exterior that encloses a delicate, ornate interior. Since it was built, Touro Synagogue has been considered one of America's most beautiful sanctuaries, a building whose graceful forms provide an idea of the majesty and grandeur of the ancient Jewish worship. Touro Synagogue is the oldest Jewish house of prayer in the United States and a living embodiment of the principles on which our country was founded. It is no accident that Touro Synagogue came into being in Newport, Rhode Island. In colonial times, this city on Narragansett Bay was becoming one of the most important seaports in North America. Its narrow streets were crowded with the houses of craftsmen and merchants. So what the earliest Jewish settlers discovered was a thriving city built on opportunity and the adventure of trade. Here, new ideas and old values came together to be tested, because underlying the visible forms of Newport's prosperity was a powerful current that made Rhode Island unique, a welcoming of diversity that dated back to the liberal philosophy of its founder, Roger Williams. Other English colonies in the New World paid lip service to the ideal of religious freedom. Rhode Island was different. Here, religious sects which had been persecuted elsewhere were truly free to worship as they pleased. Newporters John Clark and Obadiah Holmes journeyed to England to secure the king's approval of the Charter of 1663, which institutionalized religious toleration in the colony. In Newport, the Quakers built their first meeting house in America, and followers of the Church of England, a minority in Puritan New England, erected Trinity Church, a soaring embodiment of their religion. The earliest Jewish families to settle in Newport had been fleeing religious persecution for centuries, first in Spain and Portugal, then in the West Indies, and even in New York, then called New Amsterdam. They were businessmen and merchants, and they had heard about Rhode Island's unique brand of tolerance. In Newport, at last, they found safe harbor. Within a few years, they bought a piece of land to be consecrated as a burial ground, an important component of Jewish belief. This simple act, the ownership of land, was in fact an eloquent expression of their newfound freedom and a statement of political identity. They belonged here, and they were here to stay. But it wasn't until 80 years later that they were ready to build a synagogue. In the 18th century, architects worked from copybooks of classical and Renaissance designs. The members of the synagogue turned to a master of these forms, Peter Harrison.
He defined what architecture was all about in the 18th century. He received a number of very important commissions, the first of which was Redwood Library. Redwood was such a terrific success that Harrison then got a series of very important commissions in Newport. He designed Touro Synagogue and the Brick Market, which is the building at the foot of Washington Square, where the Historical Society now has its Museum of Newport History. The case of Touro Synagogue is a little bit more complicated. While he did use his copybooks for the design of that, he also listened very closely to the congregation itself, who had certain ritual needs that needed to be addressed on the interior. Had certain sighting issues that needed to be addressed, again growing out of the liturgy, for the exterior, and also wanted the building to make reference to existing synagogues in Europe. The elements that Touro Synagogue shares with other Sephardic congregations are fairly well known. The fact that the bema is in the center of the room is a very Sephardic feature. But then mixed with that are these wonderful classical details, the columns that are said to represent the 12 tribes, the ornamentation, which is straight out of Renaissance Italy, which is was the next stop for this classical architecture. So the interior then mixes this Neo-Palladian architecture with Sephardic elements that were kind of universal in Sephardic congregations, but specifically he was modeling them on the Amsterdam synagogue. Of course, as important as the building is, the siting is just as important. If you think about what this part of town looked like at the time the congregation was built, it was on a hill, it was very visible, and for the Jews to build this bold, handsome, imposing even building set to the true east compass point so that it was kind of askew on the lot drew an incredible amount of attention to the building and to themselves. Again, what that signifies is their confidence in the religious toleration that Newport offered them. One of the distinguishing characteristics of many of the European synagogues built at the time is that they're hidden away in the back streets, hard to find. Try to find the Sephardic synagogue in London, for instance. It's a challenge. But in Newport, they were confident in the religious toleration and could proudly build this building and site it the way it was supposed to be oriented.
The sanctuary eventually took its name from the Touro family, who supported the synagogue and its surroundings over the years. One of its members, Judah Touro, was among the first American philanthropists funding both civic and religious causes. Each year, people of all faiths congregate at Touro Synagogue to celebrate a simple 2-page letter with profound implications in the history of the United States.
In 1636, Reverend Roger Williams was banished from the Massachusetts Bay Colony for advocating freedom of conscience in religion. Within a few years, Rhode Island became a refuge for Quakers, for Jews, and for others seeking freedom from tyranny and prejudice. We are here today to celebrate both a moment and a place in history. To the Hebrew congregation in Newport, Rhode Island, gentlemen, while I receive with much satisfaction your address replete with expressions of affection and esteem, I rejoice in the opportunity of assuring you that I shall always retain a grateful remembrance of the cordial welcome I experienced in my visit to Newport from all classes of citizens. It is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it was by indulgence of one class of people that another enjoyed the exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens. May the children of the stock of Abraham, who dwell in this land, continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants. May the Father of all mercies scatter light and not darkness in our paths, and make us all in our several vocations useful here, and in his own due time and way everlastingly happy. G. Washington.
My favorite thing is to refer to the significant numbers that appear. The pillars, the 12 pillars, the candelabra that has 12 branches, and the 12 tribes of Israel is a symbol of unity. It's a symbol of coexistence, peaceful coexistence without persecution. They wanted to believe that they were living in a place where the Jewish people as a whole would not have to suffer. And that wasn't true anywhere in the world until they came to America. I like the Torah because it's open to the crossing of the Red Sea. And the crossing of the sea is a symbol that becomes part of the survival of the Jewish community of Newport. I think people look upon the synagogue as an American shrine, which it really is, and it's also an international synagogue. So people have heard about the synagogue from all over the world. Many people ask permission just to sit by themselves for a few minutes, say personal prayers.
One of the most engaging elements of a tour of the synagogue today is the enduring legend of the trap door. Did it lead to an escape route for the first congregation, and was it the opening, as Newport legend has it, to a hidden way station on the Underground Railroad?
Right here in the middle of the bima, there is a trapdoor. And the question is, why did the original congregants build this trapdoor here?
Touro's trapdoor leads to a cellar, not to an escape tunnel as many believe. Historical evidence suggests that the trapdoor served a symbolic purpose for the colonial congregants. It reminded them of their past persecution and their good fortune at being able to worship freely here in Newport, without need of escape. Today, Touro Synagogue is at once a National Historic Site and an active house of worship. When a bride and groom exchange vows in Touro or name a baby at this bima, they become part of the long history of the synagogue. Each prayer service, each ceremony adds new meaning to the soul of the building. Touro is a proud symbol of the endurance of the Jews in the face of persecution and of the precious principles of religious freedom that they enjoyed and helped to strengthen here in America.